Hello, my name is Juliana Evans, and I'm going to be talking about the punishment system. It can never be truly perfect, but no one is perfect and no one has perfect judgment. This may be true, however, that doesn't mean that we should let things stay the way they are. In this line, just like crime itself, the fear of crime may possibly be considered one of the most significant social problems that a country can deal with, and it doesn't help when the punishment system in the United States is extremely flawed. First of all, I don't believe in our method of having a harsh punishment system. Let's think logically. The stricter a parent is, the more sneaky and bad behaviored the kid is going to be. But why is that? Take spankings as an example. They're supposed to teach children that they should behave to avoid being punished. Ironically, this makes them want to misbehave even more since they think that they will not get caught. Children who are spanked may also resent their parents more than the other types of parenting. And I think the same applies to criminals. The harsher the punishment, the more criminals will want to disobey the law because they think they won't get caught. And it causes the criminals to become even sneakier, and then they will start to despise the government even more for allowing these types of punishments. So how do we learn from our mistakes if they are stuck in toxic prisons? How do criminals learn from that? The logic that people put behind this is that criminals won't want to commit a crime again when we punish them severely. It will stop them from wanting to steal things and murder people if their punishment is this hard. So how is that working out for us? I first want to improve this issue by reforming our prisons. There's this article that says that cognitive behavioral therapy, which is counseling prisoners on how to avoid the places, people, and situations that prompt them to commit crimes, can reduce a convicted criminal to reoffend by 10 to 30% and is especially useful in dealing with young offenders. And it's also cheap, a rounding error in the $80 billion a year that America spends on imprisonment and probation. Yet, only 5% of American prisoners have access to it. And I think this is pretty self-explanatory and why that should be reformed. Why isn't there more cognitive behavioral therapy if there are studies showing that this proves to be helpful? This will overall improve the prison atmosphere because the prisoners are improving their mindset with this therapy, which leads to a less hostile area and less bad influences. When there are less bad influences, then the crime rate will reduce because they will be released from prison and they didn't have it as bad as an experience than if there was no therapy at all. Appeals to make prisons more humane often fall on deaf ears. Voters detest criminals, but they detest crime even more. So politicians should not be afraid to brace proven ways to make prison less of a school of crime and more of a path back to productive citizenship. My second way of fixing our punishment issues is by correcting the harshness of some punishments. Let's say that a child is convicted of using drugs. His punishment might be based on the fact that he is a juvenile drug addict. But half of all adolescents have used drugs at least once. So how is that fair to convict as if they are a drug addict? What needs to happen is there should be more research done on the specific individual. Analyze the kid and have an expert in psychology evaluate to avoid a misdiagnosis of the kid having a serious drug problem. This is just one example of this form of correcting the harshness because based on the diagnosis of the kid should be the basis of his punishment. What would be best in his situation if he has a serious drug problem or is just a curious teenager who wants to experiment until they finally mature? What about if the kid was just pressured to use drugs? Is it really logical to just put a teenager in juvie because they felt pressured to use drugs? Teenagers are not at that point in their life where they can make decisions for the better of themselves yet. If someone their age says that it's going to be okay and they will be more popular if they try it, they most likely will say yes. What would help them more, a correction facility with individuals who are bad influences, or rehab and a psychologist to work the teenager's problem out? That happens to a lot of less dangerous criminals. Once they are only surrounded by dangerous criminals in prison, they start picking up their felonious habits. We want to avoid that as best as we can. So let's use other ways to punish criminals based on the psychological analysis they get. Maybe community service, or if they committed the crime because they were poor, then establish more jobs in their area. Because if he was poor enough to result in crime, then most likely others will as well. Criminals tend to struggle to get a job after prison because there's 27,000 state licensing rules keeping felons out of jobs. Most criminals are in jail because they couldn't get a job or their job wasn't a living wage. Crime increases when criminals can't get a job, since what else are they supposed to do if they can't make any money? So let's look at the bigger picture. Any type of crime that has been committed, let's have people analyze the criminal and their intentions instead of just looking at the evidence against them and base the punishment on that. Because in the long run, putting them in prison can do more harm than good. And the stigma that comes with incarceration sometimes results in poor health in the future. It affects the physical and mental well-being of the criminal. What prison has all nice people inhabiting it and the rooms are all very clean and everyone is fair? That prison doesn't exist and is impossible to ever exist. But just think about it. If anyone is in there for too long, they are going to be affected by that majorly. Yes, a lot of criminals deserve to go to prison, but sometimes their sentence is too long and in the long run hurts their health and their mindset. And what is even worse about this is that African Americans have it even more bad than white males and females. The article Years of Life Lost to Prison said that African Americans males tend to spend on average 61.8 times longer in prison as compared to Caucasian women. So not only are punishments that are given are somewhat too harsh, there is racism mixed in as well. The only way I can think of to reform racism is that people educate themselves. Thank you for listening.